I now have the rear fuel tank removed from the Ford pickup. The Ford pickup was having a problem that's, I think, been mentioned in a recall on these pickups, where the check valve in one of the fuel pumps would quit working, causing the opposite tank to fill up with fuel and actually overflow. The way that the fuel system works on this pickup, and this is a 1992, is that there's just a T connector in the return line and in the fuel supply line. The active tank, in the active tank, electrical current is switched to its fuel pump, and there's an automatic check valve in each tank, so that, like, if the front was used, for instance, the front fuel pump was turned on and pressure began to come from it, a check valve would close in the supply and the return lines on the rear tank, so that no fuel would go back to it. And conversely, if the rear tank was used, the check valves would close in the front fuel tank. But in this one, the first problem I noticed was that the engine quit running at a stoplight, and I was able to get it started again by changing to the front fuel tank. And I'd also been having some kind of weird problems just with hesitation during acceleration, where it would just sort of buck. And I think it's all due to problems in the fuel delivery modules. The fuel pump unit is called the fuel delivery module on these models. So anyway, what I had to do, and when I drove into the driveway back in May, gasoline had actually started to leak out of the rear fuel filler tank. I got a can and collected the gasoline, any that had leaked out, but thank God it didn't happen as I was driving, because I was noticing on the day that the problem really manifested itself that the fuel pressure, that the response of the engine was pretty poor, like it had low fuel pressure. And probably was due to the fact that the check valves were open on this and not allowing the pressure to build up to what it should be. So I knew what I had to do would be to remove the rear fuel tank. And I had to remove the fuel tank straps first of all, and it required a 15mm deep reach socket. And this was such a pain to get out of the truck. I first pumped out as much fuel as I could into the gas can, and even with that, once I took the fuel pump straps off, I put the concrete block with a board on top to help support it. But this is not very much smaller than the frame rails. It's hard, it was really hard to get it out. And then I had to pump out about another maybe 7 gallons of fuel. I had to fill up these glass jars with fuel. I'm going to transfer those to gasoline cans soon. But I had to use these jars because I just had so much fuel. And you'll notice the fuel in the jar is actually kind of an amber color. And these new gasolines seem to start getting gummy on you real quickly. So in any case, I've got the fuel tank removed. And this uses the Ford quick disconnect connectors. So you can see there the tool that you have to use. And the tool just kind of fits up inside the collar of the fuel lines. You can see, well, it's maybe too dark to see the fuel lines, but they're up there. And I think that this is one of the first years that they started using the quick disconnect system. The Lincoln Town Car, for instance, is an '89, and when I had to repair the fuel system on it, all the connectors use those little plastic clips. But this uses the quick disconnect system here. Here, there was a fuel tank vent. Here's the fuel tank input from the filler. And let me look at the, I'll show you the fuel filler assembly. It's actually got this concentric tube. Here's the fuel filler. Not only does it have a tube here, it's got an additional tube which goes down on the fuel tank, which I think is good for safety. The Lincoln doesn't have that extra tube to it. It just has the metal part, which just fits into a hose that goes into the fuel tank. But it does make it more difficult to get it out. So the next step in the repair process will be to get the locking ring off of the fuel pump there. And I'm going to have to wire it. I've got the new Airtex fuel pump. I'm going to have to solder the connections, hook it up with heat shrink tubing, and get the actual new fuel pump module put in there. But I've at least got now the fuel tank removed from the truck, and it's taken several weeks worth of figuring it out to get it off, but finally I now have it off. So next step will be to actually replace that fuel pump.